Hello and good morning. Welcome to your daily sit rep for Tuesday, the 9th of September, 2025. I'm your host, Mike Shelby. Coming up on today's member-only briefing, over on the high side, we're going to talk about this big surge into Chicago along with the Homeland Operations brief. Until then, let's go ahead and jump in the daily sit rep. Robert, good morning. Starting off here with this latest from the Supreme Court.
Good morning, Mike. So yesterday, Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts released a ruling saying that President Trump can temporarily fire FTC or Federal Trade Commission Commissioner Rebecca Slaughter while her lawsuit works its way through the courts. And Slaughter was the only Democrat FTC commissioner. This decision is important because this has potential implications for a future Supreme Court decision on this lawsuit, which stems from a decision under FDR called Humphrey's Executor versus the United States. Basically, the Supreme Court blocked FDR from firing an FTC commissioner at the time over policy disagreements. I've seen legal analysts say this is a hint that the Supreme Court would actually side with Trump in this new case.
Mm-hmm. And then that would allow Trump to do what exactly?
He would be able to fire the commissioners in some of these independent regulatory agencies, basically without running into similar lawsuits like this.
Okay. All right. Interesting. All right. And then the latest here from DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, are going after the Sinaloa cartel.
Yeah, they announced that they actually conducted this surge between the 25th and 29th of August, where they arrested 617 individuals connected to the Sinaloa cartel. And this was conducted through 23 domestic field offices, and they said offices in 7 foreign regions, though they did not name where those foreign offices were. And according to this release, the DEA says that the Sinaloa cartel is actually operating in at least 40 countries around the world. Okay,
40 countries, but these operations were conducted out of 23 field offices stateside. So I take it I understand then that at least some portion of these 617 individuals were located within the U.S.
Correct.
All right. Good news. I feel bad for those DEA agents arresting their friends. All right. Let's move, because they famously use the cartels against each other. So everyone knows that. All right. Moving on here to the FCC.
So yesterday, the FCC announced that they're going to withdraw recognition from 7 test labs. And these are the test labs we talked about before that review and approve electronics for sale and use in the U.S. And they said this is due to ownership or control by a foreign adversary. I'm looking through the list. Most of these appear to be owned or controlled by the Chinese government. And this follows a decision in March by the FCC to implement a new regulations basically on these electronics test labs. They also said that there were 4 other foreign adversary owned or controlled test labs that their recognition expired and they're not going to be renewed. Mm-hmm. And then finally, Mississippi state government established a parallel criminal court this year in Jackson, Mississippi, to deal with a backlog of criminal cases. And Mississippi state officials said that this new court was necessary due to a spike in crime in Jackson, Mississippi, and a shortage of resources for law enforcement and shortage of judges. And interestingly, there have been some similar. This seems to be another data point in a trend of red states exerting more law enforcement control over some of the major cities that are Democrat controlled within their state. So we saw earlier this year Texas deploying National Guard and Department of Public Safety officers for anti-ICE protests in Houston. Louisiana actually created a state police unit to patrol New Orleans. And apparently recently Missouri actually took over the St. Louis Police Department, which I thought was interesting. That's typically something you see at the federal level with these consent decrees, where the DOJ would have a consent decree with the local police department where they effectively have control over enforcement operations indirectly. And then also apparently in Georgia and Indiana, both of these states expanded their state police presence in cities and even created state boards to investigate local prosecutors for misconduct.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting, Robert. I know under the Obama administration, there was some DOJ oversight. Basically, they sent Justice Department officials into these police departments that were accused of wrongdoing, systemic racism, et cetera, and they actively monitored, and I don't know at what point influenced, but they obviously had some presence here. But this is not federal oversight. This is actually at the state level, I wonder if this is not a model that more states will adopt. You say the Missouri state government took over the St. Louis Police Department. And do you have any other details on exactly what happened there?
I know I don't yet. I'm going to be keeping an eye out to see how, if more red states adopt this playbook, because this is, I think, something that other red states are going to look, other Republican controlled states are going to look at, especially because one of the major criticisms of both the Trump administration and the Republican Party after these federal surges into some of these bigger cities has been that there are a lot of high crime cities within red states, and I think state level Republican officials are going to look at that and say, you're correct. Well, let's do something about it.
Mm-hmm. You know what this reminds me of? If I recall correctly, I remember out in Washington State, for instance, there were some sheriffs, county sheriffs, that said, we're not going to enforce these Washington State gun laws because we think they're unconstitutional. And it's not just in Washington State, it has been in additional states as well. But there was talk about, I don't know if it goes to the state legislature or if the governor can do it, but they were talking about recalling these sheriffs, basically removing them from office and then holding a special election to elect a new sheriff, or maybe appointing an interim sheriff or something like that. But that is done at the state level, at the state capitol. And it seems like these states may have some way of doing this for city police chiefs, not just county sheriffs.
Well, primarily, and this depends on the specific state law and state constitution, but generally states have a sovereignty over the city. So in some cases, the state governments could just reach down to the city and dissolve the city government and effectively take control of the entire city government with an appointed council.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, it sure seems like this is opening up a new avenue for these red states to go after blue cities. All right. Thanks for that, Robert. And let's go ahead and move on to the global sit rep. Jared, good morning.
Morning.
Let's start with the latest in the Caribbean.
Absolutely. A whole bunch of stuff happening down there. So Secretary of War Pete Hegseth and the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Kane visited the USS Iwo Jima and some of the forces that are stationed down in Puerto Rico. Hegseth told the troops that the mission is, quoting, to end the poisoning of the American people. Now that's significant because that's the same buzz phrase as was used in the sanctions that were laid on the Chinese opioids coming through. Deputy Secretary of State Landau spoke with the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, and this is to reaffirm their support for the U.S. mission in the Caribbean. Now, this is particularly important because of all the reactions down there. Trinidad was the only one that came out and said, yeah, you have complete use of our island. You can do whatever you want from us as a launching point. So I think that's very significant that basically the number two for foreign policy here is actually reaffirming that that's still the case. Now, over the weekend, President Trump was addressed directly, hey, how do you feel about striking cartels in Venezuela itself? Not around it, but in the actual country. And he didn't deny that it was on the table, said, well, you're going to find out. So I think all this points toward we're looking at extended operations, almost certainly with all the messaging coming out of Rubio and others, that we're going to see additional strikes as well. The extent to which or where we put these obviously remains ambiguous as well.
Mm-hmm. But I would expect this is probably going to remain within the realm of counter narcotics and going after like Trinidad Aragua and these other transnational criminal organizations, which are now also foreign terrorist organizations. But we're probably not looking at strikes against Maduro himself or the Venezuelan government. Okay.
No, this would almost, given that everything is about, preventing the poisoning of the American people and countering narco-terrorism, it's going to be about taking care of that. And I think this may actually be related to Maduro's messaging. He's been focusing really hard on, we are also doing this, but in our border region with Colombia, we're also countering drugs. So I think he's trying to play ball a little bit while still trying to maintain his face of, being the leader of Venezuela.
Yeah. Maybe he's just going after his rivals. Maybe this is an excuse to say he is taking action on drug trafficking and taking out the competition simultaneously. All right. Let's move on here. Jared, I'll just let you continue.
Absolutely. Made the rounds on social media yesterday that the U.S. sanctioned a bunch of call centers. Everybody focused on that, but didn't pay attention to what was actually happening with it. These were in Myanmar or Burma, depending on how you want to label that one, and Cambodia. And this is specifically as part of the government's effort to curb transnational criminal organizations. Now, the sanctions also target several Chinese criminals that were involved around that region, and they were using virtual currency scams that were simulating investment programs. So call a target, pilfer money. And they had, in 2024, they had achieved basically extracting $10 billion from the American public just in that year. Now, there was actually appears to be a related case. The Justice Department sentenced a Chinese national to 51 months in prison and ordered almost $27 million in restitution from him for laundering money through the call centers in the same city as what these sanctions were hit with. So it looks like they are taking not only economic actions, but proper legal actions as well to address this issue and stop it. I do expect this will probably expand. I don't think this is going to be limited to Southeast Asia as well. Over in the Middle East, the state of Israel is prefacing its Gaza City takeover with an evacuation order. They did a flyer campaign. The prime minister came out and said, "Hey, you are warned, get out now." They're telling everybody, every single resident of Gaza City must leave. Now, Israeli Defense Minister Katz has previously promised to make Gaza become Rafah and Beit Hanun, basically threatening both of those cities were reduced to they were flattened. So he's threatening to do that as well, specifically because Hamas has not released the hostages. And all of this is important because this still remains the Egyptian red line of don't push these people into us, and they have no other way to go except into the Egypt border region. So I'm continuing to monitor to see if Egypt responds. I have not seen a response in the past 24 hours from them.
And that has been a red line for Egypt
2
and
years.
Turkey. Yeah, and other countries. All right.
Yep.
Tiptoeing around the red line for sure.
Oh, yeah.
All right. And then listen, President Trump, I believe, is headed to the UK next week, and he's taking a handful of these CEOs with him, like NVIDIA and OpenAI, Sam Altman, and some other, like some real big tech guys. I thought that was interesting that this is an official state visit, and these CEOs are accompanying Trump to discuss things with the UK. I'm not sure exactly yet what this is going to be about, but we are going to look into it. I thought that was an interesting data point, considering Five Eyes, which is roughly the Anglosphere, is going to meet and discuss border security issues together.
Yes. And these are all of the Internal Secretary, or as we call her, the Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, and her counterparts meeting inside of the UK. And she's going to meet with the Australian, Canadian, New Zealander, and United Kingdom counterparts there. And this is all to discuss countermeasures against gangs and drug trafficking, which is a common theme that keeps showing up. That drug trafficking, I think we're going to use for a lot of expanded operations around the world, if I'm being frank here.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, the Anglosphere needs border security. We know that. Hey, just one question here before we move on. Well, actually, let's go ahead and do this. We got 82 protests coming up today. And with that, guys, I'm going to take a question, and then we're going to jump over to the high side. So, Jared, if you can please start prepping that. One question is, are you concerned about a 7 October style jihad attack? And this is coming from people like Sarah Adams and others. I've addressed this on the show repeatedly. I don't know how credible the warning is. I have no reason to doubt. You just go down the line of reasoning and you say, is it feasible? Yes. Is it appropriate for jihadists to be planning a catastrophic attack inside the United States? Yes. Is it timely? In other words, why now? Should it be at any point in the near future? And yeah, maybe now's as good a time as any. Maybe it'll coincide with the midterms or maybe the elections if it does end up happening. And is it consistent with previous operations? Yes, we know they want to conduct catastrophic attacks. I will say this. I am looking at the who's who inside the Trump administration, National Security Council, Counterterrorism Center. I'm I'm optimistic that they are not only aware of the threat, but they're actively looking out for it. So in terms of how I address that, I would just say it is possible. Obviously, I don't have the inside information. All I can go off of is what these people say, and they've been saying it for a couple of years now. At first glance, my initial thought was it's not necessarily difficult to believe, because these people are saying jihadists want to kill like 50 to 60,000 Americans in some kind of Mumbai-style swarm attack against soft targets. Is it feasible? Yes. Is it appropriate for them to do? Yes, of course. Is it consistent with what we know about them or what we think they want to do? Yes. And then, is in terms of timeliness, yeah, it would be timely. So again, I take it seriously. I can't speak to its credibility. And with that, guys, we're going to go ahead and jump over to the high side for the members only briefing. Robert is going to run us through today's Homeland Operations Brief. That's a section of the early warning briefing we do every day. We catch you up on what's going on with the National Guard, what's going on with federal law enforcement in these cities, and then the left wing and the far left response as well, what they are saying and doing in preparation to counter the Trump surge. And that is part of an early warning subscription. So head over to forwardobserver.com/trial. Try us out free for 7 days. I think you'll like it. And with that, stand by and we'll start our early warning briefing here.